Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Gridiron Review. Alongside Bill Wagner, I'm Pete Medhurst. And Bill, this is the time of the year that we like, November. This is when the stakes rise. The cream rises to the top. Whatever cliche you want, the best teams always step up at this time of the year. When they can smell the trophy, they smell the bacon. We'll see what's shaking coming up this week. On the high school front, no surprises, Bill. We talked about it. You had essentially four teams down the stretch for two spots. Arundel, Meade take those last two spots in Class 4A East. That means we get a rematch of what was a great game a couple of weeks ago between Broadneck and Meade. Arundel travels down to take on an undefeated North Point team. But for Chuck Markowitz's team, it's a return to the postseason, believe it or not, for the first time since 2014.
Yeah, hard to believe. And he did a terrific job because they were behind the eight ball early, as we've discussed many times. They lost two of their first three games, and they have, I think they finished on a 7-game winning streak, I'm pretty sure. So terrific effort, and we mentioned about, well, Ryan Sedgwick had a big game this week, but Darius Hunter has really carried the load for the Wildcats, and that'll be interesting to see if they can go down to North Point and pull the upset. It's happened before, I think.
And look, let's face it, Darius will have to be the key in that game because to beat North Point, the best way to do it is to keep them off the field, keep that offense off the field. And again, this is why Chuck Markowitz has won so many games, County Hall of Famer. I mean, This is a guy that, you know, philosophically said this year, the running game is working for us, so let's keep utilizing the running game, use it to set up their passing game. As you mentioned, Sedgwick this week, 271 yards and 41-20 closeout win over Severna Park. But that's what makes great coaches great coaches. The willingness to do what's working as opposed to what they want to do or philosophically want to do, and they did that and made great adjustments this year.
Well, I think part of that element is that he realizes he has a better defense than he has in years past, and if you know that he's playing that whole run the ball, take time off the clock, let your defense do its job. It kind of all works together. North Point should be worried about a tough Arundel team coming down. They got nothing to lose. No one's going to expect them to win. And obviously, this Meade Broadneck shapes up as a heck of a game.
Have you heard Broadneck went undefeated? Won the county championship this year.
Yes, they did. We've talked about it every week on the show. I don't think anybody's gotten more publicity than Broadneck High football this year. They had a lot of games covered by the newspaper, and they've been talked about on this show regularly. And it's another tremendous effort by Shane Davis and company, Jason Carcamo. We mentioned the same names over and over, and you know Broadneck's the favorite. They've got the #2 overall seed in the playoffs.
Behind Wise by 0.3 of a point.
Right, very close. So they wanted that #1 overall, but #2 is not bad. And they'll be home at least through the region playoffs. And so Meade showed they're capable of beating Broadneck. Albert Jones, head coach of Meade, done a terrific job this season. So that ought to be an interesting game.
Yeah, Shane Davis, 13 of 18, 162 and 3 scores. And probably, I mean, I would think at this point, you start looking across the board at your, you know, maybe not only all-county quarterback, but Shane Davis got to be a guy that's in contention for MVP of the whole deal, for Player of the Year.
He could be the Player of the Year for the Capital Gazette. He could be Rhodes Trophy. I mean, obviously, we wait till the end of the year to see because playoffs do mean something. A few years ago, Donovan Franklin did not get the Capital Gazette Player of the Year, which is unfortunately we have to pick that before the playoffs are complete. But then he led Old Mill all the way to the state finals and was big. And he earned the Rhodes Trophy because of his postseason performance. So that's one of the reasons why we do that Rhodes Trophy as late as possible so that all games are accounted for. But, yeah, Shane Davis has been as consistent as anyone out there. There's some other outstanding players. Obviously, Arundel might want to throw Darius Hunter in the mix. I don't know what his final rushing numbers, but he's a very good player. But, you know, I have always said in my philosophy, to the victor go the spoils. And so when you're talking about Player of the Year, I think you've got to look at the undefeated team.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And obviously Rob Elliott would be certainly a candidate for Coach of the Year as they complete the undefeated season. Meanwhile, Old Mill 7-3. It's normally good for most teams in the county, but for Old Mill, I'm sure they feel like there's plays they left out there this year from the get-go when they lost to North Point in the opener 42-0. But Nate Carball with a 20-yard run that pulled away from a 28-28 tie. And I know Eddie Dolce's team down at South River finishes 6-4, but man, what a step of progress from last year to this year for the Seahawks, and that makes that 4A East region even deeper going forward. So a quality year by South River as well to finish the season at 6-4. Meanwhile, North County picked up its first win of the year, and the numbers and things started falling apart for Southern toward the end of the year. Remember, early in the season, they scored a bunch of points but couldn't stop anybody, and then as the year went on, just couldn't score the points.
Yeah, the offense struggled.
Yeah, North County wins it by a score of 37-0, and the infamous and one of the best, Dina Bowls, because it had a lot of stakes. Northeast had a chance to sneak in to the bottom side of the playoffs with some help. If they'd have won the game, Chesapeake wins it 17-0. Khalil Gary with a touchdown run, and Colton Spangler.
This guy can kick.
This dude, I'm telling you right now, if you got any college coaches watching us, whether you're D1, D2, or D3, you might want to take a look at Mr. Spangler for Chesapeake, who banged a 44-yarder as Chesapeake won 17-0. They are the 2 seed in 3A East. They will take on Long Reach coming up in the playoffs at home on Friday night. And yes, that will necessitate an adjustment to the youth football schedule on Friday night. Those games will be moved. You can go to aacounty.org and click on the team schedules at the Recreation and Parks page to find out where that Friday night action is moving. But here's another guy, Rob Elliott, got to be in consideration for that Coach of the Year. And what a job he's done at Chesapeake with another playoff berth. I mean, this is something that they have been in the discussion now multiple times over the last few years. And there was a time where if they only won a couple of games, they were happy at Chesapeake. Not anymore.
Right. Well, and Bob Hoke was on our show last week, the high school sports center from the Capitol, and he reminded me that Chesapeake went 2-8 last year. They had a rare down season under Rob Elliott, and Rob said there was a lot of things went wrong last year, but that's a great bounce back season. And obviously, when you're talking about Coach of the Year, that's one of the factors you look at is somebody who authored a tremendous turnaround, and that they did getting into the playoffs. And you're right. I mean, Chesapeake was a perennial 4-6, 5-5. And I mean, if they got 6-4, it was a reason to cheer. But under Rob Elliott, they are now.
Well, it changed the expectations of the program.
Totally changed the expectations, and it filters all the way down to the youth level into the Panthers and the various other groups that feed the Chesapeake program. I mean, they feel like they're a winning program. You guys are less likely to go to Mount St. Joseph or Spalding if they think that they can go and have a winning program at Chesapeake. I think that played against Chesapeake High School in the years past is that, Mount St. Joe's and Spalding and these other private schools come in and say, hey, you really want to go to Chesapeake where you win 3 or 4 games, or you want to come here and play some big-time football? And that's why a guy like Zach Abey, who's from Pasadena, ends up at Spalding. And there's a ton of guys at St. Joe over the years have been from Pasadena. They've recruited that area hard. In fact, I was noticing that one of the players from Northeast, Forrester, is a transfer from Mount St. Joseph. So, huge for Rob Elliott. And winning the Dina Bowl, it's a big one.
No doubt. C-Conference coming up in the MIAA. Going to get a rematch of a great game from earlier this year where AACS beat St. John's Catholic Prep 9-8. AACS prepping with a 37-12 win over Friends. Dominic Banks with 3 scores in that game for AACS. But here is AACS back in an opportunity to win another championship.
They won a few years ago.
You got a rematch of a 9-8 game from earlier this year.
Yeah, that's going to be a good one. And yeah, Annapolis Area Christian School was the touchdown club team of the year, I think 2 years ago. I want to say the 2015 season. And Coach Mike Lynn has done a tremendous job. I was talking last week with Bobby Hoke that when Kenny Lucas left, they thought things might fall apart because he was responsible for building that AACS program up from really nothing. But Mike Lynn has come in and as Bob Hoke was mentioning last week, they got some athletes there.
Yeah.
There are some decent athletes in Annapolis Area Christian School, and
good location. School's got a good location. You can pull from Howard County, PG, in the Laurel area if you want.
Right. Well, one of the things,
facilities, 2 gyms over there.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. One of the things you're probably going to be talking about if they win a second championship in 3 years, MIAA may be forcing them up. That's usually what happens if you start to dominate one level. They push you up,
and they should.
Right. Well, I think Annapolis Area Christian School can compete with Severn and St. Mary's in the B Conference. I think they're in that conversation. They're certainly. I don't know what the results would be if they played Severn or St. Mary's, but I think ACS certainly could be competitive in the B Conference.
Convoluted tiebreaker with a bunch of teams in the B Conference, and guess what? We get a rematch of your alma mater and Severn coming up this week. St. Mary's really a couple of big plays early to jump on Severn right away this past week, and a Severn train that was rolling through 8 weeks kind of, hit the tough part of the tracks here the last couple of weeks. Can they rally it back to beat St. Mary's in an opportunity for the B Conference title?
Yeah, well, this game was a bit of a surprise. I mean, obviously, St. Mary's jumped on them earlier. They had an 88-yard kickoff return. They had an interception return of 40 yards. So they jumped out 14-0 early lead on Severn, and that really takes the wind out of your sails a little bit when you fall behind on a special teams and a defensive touchdown, which doesn't happen very often. Jason Bedroni, head coach of St. Mary's, got to give him all sorts of props. They finished strong, and they lost some games early out of conference, but when they went into conference, they performed. The boys' Latin game being the only slip-up, and then BL lost, which is how St. Mary's and Severn are back in a title championship, a rematch of sorts. And, they could turn around quite easily. Severn's capable. I think things went south a little bit for Severn when they lost the starting quarterback, Craig Stevens. They had to move Henry Rentz into the quarterback spot, which took him away. I mean, it didn't show initially, but I do believe that could have been a turnaround, because it's really tough to lose two to close out the season. I saw Julian Dominic, the Severn athletic director, at the Touchdown Club golf tournament, and I was telling him, this was Friday morning before they played, obviously the game was Saturday. I said, it's a shame that after this great season and Severn was undefeated and looking at maybe could they have an undefeated season, they will lose two in a row. I was kind of pulling his chain, but he mentioned that a few years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, they started 8-0 and lost their last two, with one of them being to St. Mary's. So this is now 2 times in the last short period of time that they've started 8-0 and finished the regular season 8-2. But
I think it's because you jinxed them by bringing up the great name of Beaver Petty on the show.
Yeah, it might have been.
By the way, this is championship week for youth football. The Saturday and Sunday sessions will be at Chesapeake High. Fridays will have to move from Chesapeake since the Cougars qualified for the playoffs. Real quick, the American schedule on Saturday at Chesapeake. And how about the Old Mill football group? They've done a marvelous job here during this season. Generals Highway and the Pasadena Chargers at 10:30 in the 70-pound game. Brooklyn Park and Old Mill, that is going to be a showdown in the 80-pound class. That Brooklyn Park team has been genuinely amazing all year long. Old Mill at Severna Park in the 90-pounder at 1:30, 3 o'clock for Old Mill and Severn. Old Mill at Gork in the 11U at 4:30. 12U is Sac and the Panthers at 6 o'clock. And then the nightcap, Varsity U, Cape and Crofton coming up in the 7:30 matchup over in the American playoffs at Chesapeake High School. And again, behave yourself. Everybody sits on one side. Root for your team. We'll all get along on Saturday and have a great day there. Coming up, we'll take a look at the colleges. Tough days for Maryland and Navy this week. We'll do that when we return on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back, Bill. Tough day for Navy Thursday night up at Lincoln Financial Field. Mids had never lost there. They were 12-0 lifetime between Army and beating Temple. For one of the few times, though, in the triple option era, this team looked completely out of sync. And not only that, but just didn't seem to be there.
No.
There's a time every now and then where a team, and this hasn't happened in Navy very much, so it was strange to see, but they were not all there Thursday night. Temple took advantage. Mids closed the gap late, got within an onside kicks chance, but Temple wins at 34-26. Now the Mids reeling a little bit with a very good SMU team coming to town on Saturday. That
was a befuddling performance. I said to anyone that would listen that Navy should beat Temple because they're a flat-out better team. And everything that we'd seen to date told us that. Stats, records, the eye test, everything said that Navy was a better team than Temple, but it didn't look like that on Thursday night. Navy, it was obvious from the outset that they just did not come prepared to play. They were listless, lackluster, did not have a lot of energy and effort and focus. They even admitted that. DJ Palmore, the captain, admitted it after the game. Ken Niumatalolo, frankly, looked stunned in the post-game press conference. He didn't know where this came from. They coming off a bye week. They got a lot of guys back from injury. You would have thought that everything was pointing in the direction of a great performance. Coach Niumatalolo harped all bye weekend, for 2 straight weeks about playing Navy football, And just something's not right. And that's basically what Ken Niumatalolo said after the game. There's something's amiss with this team. And he doesn't have much time to get it together because this schedule is not very favorable going down the stretch. The SMU is playing very good football at the moment. That is going to be a tough game against a very high-powered opponent. Their defense doesn't get it together. You think Frank Nutiel was a good quarterback or looked good against Navy? What do you wait till you see what this SMU crowd can do with Cortland Sutton? And there's another receiver, Hicks, that's got even more catches than he. SMU can throw it around. And the offense, there's something not right with the Navy offense. It just doesn't look like what we've seen before. The flow, the diversity, it's just something not there with this club. And they got to get it turned around because you got Notre Dame on the horizon. Yep. You've got Army, who, Army beat Air Force soundly, looked great. Out in Colorado Springs, first time Army's beaten Air Force in forever. And Army, it looks very formidable. They got 7 wins.
Yeah, first time Air Force have been shut out since 1992. 306 games since Air Force have been shut out. Also, you got Houston in there the day after Thanksgiving as well.
Right, so a very tough schedule to finish.
Busy schedule coming up here for the Mids. Meanwhile, Maryland, look, it's a shorthanded team. They're down to their 4th quarterback, who's a walk-on. Yeah. And they're in it with Rutgers, but they end up losing 31-24. I'm not sure you can ask DJ Durkin to do more based on the fact he's playing his 4th quarterback, who's a walk-on, who started his career at Air Force, ironically, in that game. But, just not enough guys to go do battle with. And Rutgers, an improving program under Chris Ash, get a Big Ten victory.
Yeah, it's almost hard to believe that this could happen to Maryland twice in the span of something like 4 years. Yeah. We remember the year they went through 3 quarterbacks and were down to playing
Shane Cockrell, a linebacker
right,
quarterback.
Well, it was actually that
or the kid from Roosevelt.
Right, the Roosevelt kid. Petty, I want to call it, they say his name. But right, they're playing a linebacker who used to be a quarterback in high school because they were so desperate. Well, now they're down to a walk-on transfer from Air Force, Brand. And, he actually led them down the field in the waning minutes and had a chance to tie the game. They threw a touchdown pass that was nullified to a holding penalty on Derwin Gray, which apparently was very obvious. And then at the end of the game, they threw a fade to DJ Moore and could have been a pass interference there. They didn't call. But as DJ Durkin said after the game, it shouldn't even come down to that. Maryland did not play well in a lot of areas, made a lot of mistakes. Rutgers is not a very good team. And Maryland has no chance to make a bowl now. Their schedule is absolutely brutal. Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, that's sayonara, Maryland.
Well, when you lose 3 quarterbacks, nobody expects you to make a bowl game anyway. But, hey, good old college trying to get there. We come back. Maybe you need Kirks because we always tell you it's about the Jimmies and Joes. Maybe it's about the Kirks. If you've got a Kirk, you've got a winner. We'll talk about that when we come back on the Gridiron Review. In Seattle, with only one offensive line starter playing, no one expected the Washington Redskins to get by the Seattle Seahawks, but such has been the wacky world of a very mediocre National Football League. We had some terrible games this week. Terrible football. Redskins survive in Seattle 17-14. Kirk Cousins with a 38-yarder to Josh Dotson gets some inches away from the goal line. Rob Kelly punches it in from there. And then Russell Wilson's Hail Mary knocked away by D'Angelo Hall at the end. Redskins shocked the Seahawks 17-14.
Yeah, and Seattle was awful. They had 3 missed field goals and, just could not.
Blair Walsh, 12 of 13 coming into the game. 3 of them hooked wide left.
Right, and they struggled off. It just did not look like a typical Seattle team. The weekend before, they had gone crazy in a wild shootout with the Texans.
Russell Wilson threw for 450.
Right, and he's on my fantasy team, and he really disappointed me yesterday. Although I was happy.
I had Kirk Cousins on mine this week.
I was happy to see the Redskins win. But, great win for the Redskins. On the road in Seattle, that's a good team. That's a good win. Really needed it, too, for Washington. You thought typical Redskins, they were winning most of the game. And then at the very end, all of a sudden, Russell Wilson decides to turn it on, leads them to 2 touchdowns in the 4th quarter. And you're like, Redskins left it slip away again. But great drive. And how about that catch by Dotson laying out, starting to show the ability that everyone has said this kid has. That was a tremendous catch. That's a big-time catch. It's a winning catch. That's how you win football games, folks. And a great win for the Skins.
Meanwhile, the Ravens in Tennessee against the Titans, and just not enough offense. And I said this at the beginning of the season. John Harbaugh is going to go down with the sinking ship with Marty Mornhinweg as the offensive coordinator. They've just not been able to find anything consistently with this offense from a playmaking standpoint. And, again, the Titans weren't world beaters either. But 23-20 is good enough to send the Ravens to 4-5.
Yeah, it's just ugly effort by the offense. Joe Flacco and this crew, they're just, two more interceptions by Joe. Not enough playmakers. Rashad Perryman drops balls at crucial times. There's not enough weapons. Not a consistent running game. Offensive line's terrible. You name it. And, Tennessee Titans, this would have been a money-in-the-bank victory for the Ravens in recent years. It has been since the days of Steve McNair and Eddie George that the Tennessee Titans were legitimate. But, that's where the Ravens are, right? Let's call a spade a spade. The Ravens are one of the worst teams in the NFL right now. They're just not a good football team. I don't see them going anywhere this year.
I'd love to get into player personnel with the Ravens. I could help them a lot because what they've done the last couple of years, some of those guys have just not panned out so far.
Some of the draft picks, terrible.
Got to draft better than that. That'll do it for this week's show. Again, Youth Football Championship Day. American Division starts it all off 10:30 Saturday morning, Chesapeake High School. Please get on out there and give those kids some of your support for at least part of the day coming up on Saturday. For Bill Wagner, I'm Pete Medhurst. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Gridiron Review.